our first fantastic speaker who I'll be introducing very shortly. And then we're going to hopefully have some food, drinks, and then come back in for our second speaker. We're going to do our best as well this time around, that's the last session, to make sure there's enough time for Q&A. So we're going to hopefully have our fantastic speaker, number one, and then Q&A, second speaker, Q&A, and then a bit of time at the end to answer any general questions that might crop up that fizz up to the top of your mind during the course of this evening. But yeah, without further ado, I think we've pointed to bathrooms out those ways. There is also emergency exits the way that you came in. Don't take the lift, obviously. Don't need to say that one. If there's a fire, then just get down those stairs. But there's also stairs out this way. Right, that is the most boring thing that you're going to hear this evening. So I hope that you're all excited for the stuff that we've got lined up. As I say, thank you again for coming along to the Platforms and Product Meetup. I hope you have a fantastic time. Hope you enjoy it. And the most brilliant thing about this evening is that if you're thinking, who is speaking again? Well, it's really easy to remember because they're both called Abby. But they're also both brilliant, both super interesting, and both very, 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 very knowledgeable when it comes to platforms and products and everything in between. So, without further ado, I'm going to be handing over to Abby Holmes. I want to make sure that I got. If you're looking for Abby, she's got a nice plug at the end, but Abigail Holmes is the professional LinkedIn title. But Abby, I will hand over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming this evening. The clicker doesn't work, so if you can't see, just wave if you can't see the slides. Cool. So today I'll be talking about how I try to embed the product mindset into backend software development in our platform team. So to start off, we want to ask some questions to try and get the vibe of the room. Who has ever worked in a culture where product is only applied to front-end products? So with an interface, on an app or a website? I'm so glad some of you put your hands up. And also put your hands up if you've ever been part of a culture where the only one responsible for product thinking has actually been the product manager themselves and not actually the wider team. Amazing, cool. So these are kind of the two lessons I'll refer back to today. So a bit about me and how I got into the product thinking mindset. So I initially started off as an account manager, and I was looking at how I could provide value for a range of clients. So where they were expanding, what type of talent they would need. So that included people like Theodo UK, the House of Commons, and building out their programs. I then was really lucky to work at Ocado, and they were very interested in getting us to work across the business. So at the top there in the high vis is when I used to work in construction as a project manager. And then I also dived into SQL analytics after delivering some software projects, because I thought the best way to bring in data-driven decisions into my thinking was to really dive right in. And since then, I've been at Theodo Group. So again, we deliver a range of apps, websites, and platforms to a range of different clients. And we also do quite a lot of strategy work there. So the reason I got into this is really where I started to think about products. So I'd spent years delivering projects, and I realized actually a lot of the time we deliver things that people don't really need or want. So yeah, when delivering projects, a really important part is thinking, why are we delivering what we are? So leading on quite nicely to this question, hands up if you've ever spent so much time building a feature or a product, and actually we've sent it out to the wild, no one's adopted it, or no one's liked it. Has anyone had that? Yes. Cool. So yeah, again, that's what we're kind of going through. So today I'll start off to give you a bit of context about the platform team that I was working with. Then I'll go through my first attempt at bringing products into this and realizing that though some of it was useful, there was actually an amazing opportunity to bring my technical team along with me. The second attempt there, these actually do look like some of the developers I worked with who are in the room. So if you can spot them, try to. I'm looking at them directly now. And then I'll talk about how we try to embed this way of working into our everyday life so it didn't become as much of an issue. Again, the key lessons I've just mentioned is that product can actually be applied to back-end software development. It's not just a front-end concept. And also engaging the technical team can actually really boost that long-term value that you deliver and hopefully engage your team along the way. Fab. So project context. It started off with a migration from Vue.js and .NET for an international airline. They were working on an architecture that was experiencing quite a lot of outages, and they were hoping to expand their fleet over time. So we said to them, let's move to AWS serverless. Our idea of doing this was that it was scalable, and we're really trying to address some of those issues that I've just mentioned. To find the clicker. Because it was quite a big project of work, moving over a website to a brand new platform, we were thinking, how are we actually going to break this down? So we used a team topology structure. I'm not sure if people have heard of this here. I'll give, I can see some very excited people, including Johnny, give a high overview of this. So as a basic level, you basically break it down almost into 3 sets of types of teams. So the ones I'll be talking about today were the stream-aligned teams. So we broke our different domains down into like payment experts, flight booking experts, and also flight search experts. And then the teams I primarily managed were the platform team and the complicated subsystem team. So their role was to basically make a range of tools and components and a set of APIs that these enabling teams could use. And what I realized during this is that there was 2 kind of key customers in this project that we were orchestrating. So there was the end users that would actually use the website once we'd migrated it and book the flights. But also another type of user were the stream-aligned teams. So yeah, they were basically developers building for developers. So I was really keen to understand, were we actually delivering the value that we were hoping to? Is there anywhere we can improve, and how could we continue going forward? So this is my first attempt at the product discovery. I went to see the different developers with the different teams. I sat down with them. I tried to understand, when did they use our tools? Why did they use them? What were their future plans? And I did find some really interesting insights. So for example, a lot of them didn't really know where the location of the constructs and components were. I also realized that a lot of them didn't have as much AWS expertise, and that was something we were bringing in our platform team. However, I then realized that it was quite difficult to get to the root cause of the why of my findings, because even though I have a slightly technical background, it's not my main domain of experts. So I looked around to the industry, and I'm sure some of you have heard of Marty Kagan here, who apparently helped to write Johnny's book, so go check it out. And he basically talks about, traditionally, a delivery and feature team, developers would, or just teams in general, would just create what they were told to create. And there was less focus on the long-term value, if you were checking if it delivered anything. But the new concept is building an entire product team. So the product thinking isn't just with the product manager, but it's actually getting everyone to think, what customer problems are we trying to solve? What does good look like in the long run, and how can we keep iterating on that? So I tried to bring this thinking to my team. I'm not clicking it. There you go. Cool. So I've got to say, I was really lucky. My team are really, really intellectual and creative and up for trying new things. And also at Theodo Group, we're really keen on continuous improvement and learning. We follow the lean methodology, so we're very interested on reducing waste in the long term. So again, the team were luckily very willing to come along on this experiment with me. So they, again, broke out into teams and shadowed the different developers from the SAP domain booking teams and payments. So again, they mapped out, when did they start considering our components? So was it actually before they created the features? Was it during the features? Were actually they implementing the features themselves and then having to retrospectively add them? What kind of waste was going on there? Then we were looking at why. So when did they decide to come to us? What value were they hoping that it would be delivered? And also how. So was there any alterations they were having to do to our components, our tools, or could they just jump straight in? So it gave us some very interesting findings. And it also showed us that just like in the normal like consumer markets, you tend to have different segments of people. So for example, on the BBC Good Food app is one of the front end tools I've worked on before. And we broke that down into, I guess, parents who want to make quick meals or students who might want quick ones. And the same kind of concept can be applied in this development space. So we broke down our findings and our teams into different user personas. So here you can see we have the payments team, the flight search team, and the bookings team. So what we tried to focus on was what were their skills, what was most important to them, what were their biggest pain points. And it really helped us to know who we needed to contact about certain features and when to engage them. So just a few examples. With the payments team, one of their main focus was building in resiliency to their system. Because it was an airline, every time a customer made a transaction, if they had sufficient funds in their banks, but the payment didn't go through, that was ultimately a loss for the airline company itself. So the platform team worked with them to try and build in something called their dead letter queues. So every time a payment workflow failed, they would retry another workflow to see if that helped. And then if that didn't work, we also helped to build out a different alerting system so they straight away could jump on, investigate what the issue was in prod and try and reduce that amount of revenue that was lost. Another example was that payments and booking actually had lots of very similar use cases and needs. So again, it was quite good to see that we could reuse a lot of those APIs and constructs for both of them. And then when scoping them out, we knew exactly who we needed to talk to reduce that waste later on. I don't know if people have seen this lovely illustration I forced down my colleague's throat all the time. But basically, what this is showing is a concept called jobs to be done. And it's kind of what I just described earlier. It's trying to think this nice little Mario is what the developers would normally be that we were building for. And then this nice little flower would be the tools and the components in the construct. So we were trying to build something that every time these developers wanted to do their key jobs, it was so amazing that they became the Super Mario. We wanted to think, how could our products become all-encompassing for them? And then finally, out of these learnings, we tried to put this into a product architecture. Hopefully, if there's architects in the room, this doesn't look too scary. But yeah, we broke it down into who in particular were we trying to serve, and then these jobs to be done, these key preferences that we broke down and looked at the critical performances. So in terms of critical performances, it was a way for us to check in and say, are we actually building the way we expected? Is there anything we need to alter? Are we going off-piste? And then based on this, we were able to then come up with the functions and the features and to actually prioritize accordingly. So for example, with our teams, we realized that all of them were very concerned about if the increasing volume of consumers would be able to book flights, would be able to search, would be able to pay. And especially because the business itself was expanding, that was something that was really important, a legitimate risk. So as we noticed that that was one of the key concerns that was repeated quite a few times, we were then able to decide, let's prioritize creating a test suite that our teams can reuse. And that included load testing. So it meant that as we did ramp up, they were able to test that incrementally. And also it meant that on our timelines, we made sure we put aside some ramp up support so that we could test our systems thoroughly and act on anything if things did change. So yeah, as I mentioned, this enabled the teams to trial different solutions. So I'll go through a few of the quite interesting ones. Again, as I've mentioned a few times, the location of the constructs, it was quite difficult to find for some people who weren't familiar with them. So a CDK construct is what we used as our components, but we realized that's actually quite niche. And not all of our developers actually heard of them or knew how to implement them. So we were trying to basically give them that context so it could reduce that cognitive load and they could implement them more easily. So we came up with something called the Canary application. It's basically based on the idea of the canaries going down the mine to test the environment. So we were trying to do this in a less lethal way to the canaries. But yeah, it basically provided two benefits. So the team was able to really get into the mind of the user and implement our components and think, okay, was this easy for us to do? Is there anything we need to change before we put this out there? And it was also a way then, once that was there, in this separate repo, all the teams could go there, see the examples, see when they might want to implement it. So it really boosted that autonomous implementation and a greater uptake by our teams. Another thing was implementation time, and this was a really good example of how getting your whole team involved is really important. So each time anyone needed to implement our component, they were having to implement lots of configuration code, which was causing a lot of time, and we were trying to go with the industry standards of dry, don't repeat yourself, so that in the long term, the code maintainability was easier. So we actually abstracted away this configuration boilerplate code into our reusable constructs. And as I mentioned previously, our idea as a platform team is to reduce the cognitive overload of our developers. So it meant that each time people wanted to use our components, there was exactly what they needed there, rather than having to think, how do I actually connect this into my existing code base as much? And the benefits was this, is that we actually reduced the implementation time by about 10% across the program, which obviously from a technical side is great because it's less frustrating. And from a business side, you're delivering a lot more value more quickly. And the last thing that we also found, which was really useful, was about the evolving use cases, and it very much linked into those user personas and jobs to be done. So, for example, we created a REST API for our developers to use. So that basically meant that they could abstract and see data in a certain format. So rather than having to go through a long list of data to find the information they needed, it was there in a much easier way to consume. But once we initially did this, the domains that we were working with, we built it on a particular authentication use case and a particular flow which did work. But actually, as the program expands in the long term, the authentication use cases changed. So we had to adapt that going forward. So it was quite a good lesson for us to say, actually, we need to think about how this program of work and the business evolve over time, but also how can we maintain that flexibility within our tools and constructs at the beginning, so that if we do need to make any adaptations for things we haven't been able to predict, we can do that more easily. And then the last thing we did was future-proofing. So we really looked at the ways of working to make sure that we brought in this product and value mindset throughout. So when we created our features, we've all done it when we've just jumped straight in because we're excited, but then we realize halfway through there's so many dependencies and we're all crying because we're really delayed on delivery. So we tried to put a lot more effort into that refinement initially. So we did something called functional design, which typically you would only use for like a front-end app or website in terms of like what user flow would they go on, but we've tried to use it in a way that the whole team could think, what problem is this solving? What value does it deliver? And trying to explain that if you had to explain it to the senior leadership team, how can you explain that this technical component will actually improve their system? Who are the key users, which again was really useful with our user personas? What does success look like? Are there any edge cases we haven't considered? And then design and wireframes, but again, because this was back-end software development, the platform team didn't need it as much. With technical design was our next stage, and the difference between, again, a front-end application was that our users, as we said, were the developers, so they were actually able to really understand the technical proof of concepts we came up with and technical strategies. So the team would try and put something together and remove all of those dependencies and blockers, so that when they started, they could go to it, but it meant that we were actually able to validate it with the end users quite early on. And in addition, because we're trying to do that knowledge share and the platform team had the best practices in security and infrastructure, we're able to actually share that then so people are more aware of it. Then it went off to development. But then in terms of the validation and release, part of that release process was that actually we want those target users to again validate it once we built it, so we could understand if they were happy with it, and then if there were any major changes that we hadn't thought about. Again, we're very into lean and problem solving, so we looked at, was there anything we could learn, is there anything we could adjust going forward? And this refinement, like Kanban, was actually a really useful way of doing that. Again, I'm pressing it wrong. Nice. And then the last thing we did was, one of our biggest struggles actually was trying to understand what all the different teams were going to build, especially when, lots of different evolving teams. It's a huge program. So our client works as a type of other project management methodology called SAFe. And their way of working was that they would do a PI planning, which was called program, I think it's increment, but I always say it wrong, so it's probably not. Okay, it is. And we would try and look at their roadmap for the next 3 months. So what were your goals? What were you looking at? And it meant as well that because as a whole program, we were trying to work in this refinement flow now, we were able to help them and say straight away, oh, actually, you could use our component here, or this bit should be a consideration from a security perspective. And then the next 3 months, we'd be able to build. And again, we were doing that regular user testing with them. And then again, it starts to the next PI planning. But we found that this did help to close the gap over time, and collaboration did improve a lot. Again, I think it's always a big problem or a big struggle on a big program. It's definitely something that we tried over time. Cool. So overall, the key takeaways is that business value and product thinking can be so useful for back-end software development. I think one of the main things I always heard was like, no, it's not a product, or really trying to convince people to think in that way. But actually, as we've shown, it really helped us. Also empower your team, show off the benefit of platform teams, especially as I just said, to maybe more, some senior stakeholders might not be as techy, or some of them will be, trying to show people that there is a good value to this, even if you're not a developer. And streamline this thinking into your way of working, so it doesn't become, a bit stale. It's just there in the way you think. And here's some resources. So Marty Kagan that I mentioned with the Empowered book, team topologies, and also in working backwards about Amazon, there's a really interesting chapter about how they actually created the SDK software developer kit, which again was like looking at developers as actual customers and users, and I found quite interesting. So thank you for listening, and connect with me.
So, a huge thank you first and foremost. That was absolutely awesome. And a bunch of ideas and concepts that are just amazing to hear being applied in that platform context. I think it's really inspirational actually to see how you've managed to bring that into what can be quite a challenging context for lots of different people. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It's absolutely fantastic. Love to invite questions. If anyone has a question, we only have one mic. So if people are happy to shout up, speak up loud if you have a question. If you're near the front, you might be all good. If you're near the back, then just escalate your volume and we'll make sure that Abby hears your question. But yes, do feel free.
I do have bad hearing, so shout.
We'll do like the echo effect if need be. Go ahead.
In terms of the Canary application,
Yeah.
how hard was it to sell the idea to a team to build it?
Well, the whole idea was this actually came from the team.
Really?
So the reason that we brought the team on this journey was that those kind of technical solutions, I obviously know what Canary is, but I didn't know what Canary application was. So yeah, the whole idea is that by bringing everyone along, they tend to come up with the technical solutions. And because we both understand that context, I could challenge if I didn't think it would provide as much value. But yeah, that was all then.
Ivan, go ahead.
Abby, where did you learn all of this? Were you certified as a Scrum Master or a product owner, or how did it start?
I'm a massive nerd, so I do read loads of books and go to lots of talks and things. I also worked with a fantastic woman on the BBC Good Food app who taught me loads of what I know, and she's fantastic. I then did do Scrum Master qualification. I just love a good qualification as well. Yeah, I'm just a nerd, to be honest. I just read a lot, go to talks, try things out with my team.
Amazing. If you had, because obviously you've shared 3 resources, but if you were to say, here is the first place you should go to start thinking about that product mindset, where would it be?
It doesn't need to be his book.
No, don't worry. You still get the picture, that's fine.
I quite liked Inspired by Marty Kagan. I think it's potentially the first book in his series. That was really interesting. As I said, I've been a bit exposed to product, but actually was only till I really started getting to literature that I was like, oh, this is actually a thing. So he's really good. And again, in London, there's so many good talks and people that say things, so you learn stuff there.
Amazing. Any other questions? Go ahead.
One of your slides for a solution had understand all the requirements before you start development. Isn't that the anti to an agile approach?
Yeah, so it can seem like that.
I don't disagree with you. I just
No. Totally makes sense. But basically, the whole idea of product discovery is that you try and understand those user problems from the beginning, because often, even though it's good to iterate over time, I'm sounding like I'm echoing a lot now. Even though it's good to iterate over time, if we're just building something from scratch randomly, there's a lot higher chance that it might fail. So it's almost thinking of it like a business proposal, where you want to try new things and you want to iterate and change, but ultimately you need to have done potentially some of that market research to make sure there's at least some backing behind that.
And just one quick follow-up question. How did you measure your impact?
Tricky question. I feel like doing that is definitely one of the biggest challenges from this. A lot of the things we saw, as I mentioned, with the implementation time, we were trying to measure like how long did it actually take them not physically, on the computer, to implement these components. Also, even with like the PI planning, the first few times we all tried to do it, it was actually quite long and it wasted a lot more time. But once we were a lot more aware of being really clear on what we wanted to deliver and why, and we all started thinking that product mindset, a lot of our processes just went a lot more quickly and people just understood exactly why they were doing something. Just as a whole, I think we just started getting features out that delivered more long-term value, which was definitely a benefit.
Yeah, I had one around, very similar to the last question actually, around the challenges that you faced introducing this like new way of working to your team. Obviously, like if people have been in their set mindsets for a very long period of time, then that can be very challenging as a product manager. So if you can share anything around that.
Yeah, there's also another nerdy book by Simon Sinek, I think it's how you say it. So Start with the Why. So I've always had feedback that because I do love learning things and quite interested in bringing new ideas, some people that can freak some people out. So actually explaining the why of your thinking can really help with that. And I think bringing in that agile mindset and saying, we could try this, and if it's actually so rubbish, we don't have to carry on. There was definitely things that we did that we were like, this is so boring, let's not do that. But again, it's trying to be open and encourage that trust in your whole team, that you can be quite open and honest about things, and it's not a point of blame, it's just we're learning together. That sounded quite inspirational, actually.
That was wonderful. So good. Do go ahead.
Similar kind of vein of questioning, but what were the challenges of getting buy-in from the stakeholders? Because it seems like you're taking away quite a lot of dev time putting into product thinking.
Yeah, that is true. We definitely get that a lot. Interestingly, our clients actually, some of our clients actually wanted us to think more productive because they were also not concerned, but wanted to see that we were actually considering their long-term users. But yeah, I've definitely had that challenge before. I think it's trying to show those examples of like, if you actually embed it into your ways of working so it becomes a lot more streamlined and then you're not having to think about it as much, it's actually quite quick to do in a sense. And also again, with these technical solutions, you can literally just count the amount of rework you have. And usually when you bring your developers in so they can innovate and come up with technical solutions, you get a lot less rework. Also, I think like motivated teams, I feel like a lot of the developers I've worked with found it so much more interesting because they're super clever to like think of something cool rather than just doing what they're told.
And how do you often engage with your customers, and what sort of discussions do you have with them?
So in terms of the discussions, I would kind of explain to them what product discovery is. And in terms of, say if I was starting with a brand new client, I try and understand, again, from a business perspective, like what is their business model, how do they make money, what do they see as their challenges. And if it's a particular product we're building for that client, it's trying to understand, okay, how do you see this product as part of your overall monetization strategy? And therefore, based on that, who will it serve? And really understanding, okay, if we do build this, then how can we actually see that that is a success or not, and framing it that way.
So we've got time for one more question. So fortunately for you, sir, your compatriots that were around you asking questions have allowed you to be the final question. But do not worry, we will have some more time for Q&A at the end of our subsequent talk. So do shout out.
I was just going to ask about the, so you're doing quite a lot of product discovery, you're learning new things, and just wondering how you managed to still maintain some flexibility in terms of the roadmap, because you were talking about SAFe and you're talking about the other plans of the 3-month increments through SAFe and all that, and how you were you able to create some space because you're learning new things, and all the things that you had on your roadmap originally that you thought, well, actually it's not right, it's not the right thing to do, and maybe it's actually conflicting with something on somebody else's roadmap and one of these increments. I mean, how did you manage that?
Yeah, so this was a real trial and error. I think the first time we worked in this framework with the clients, we thought we had to be really rigid. And as we said, we learn things all the time. That isn't preferably my way, the best way to go sometimes. But especially as the platform team in particular, because we did have more leeway on what we wanted to deliver. If we understood their roadmap, sometimes I even built into the delivery plan that I knew a certain release would be coming up, and that we needed to give a bit of time for that. And again, it was a lot of negotiation with the client to say, this is what we will high level propose, but it might change. And then if there was any change in the product roadmap itself, I would negotiate that. This is the value, this is the cost and benefit. Do you agree with our proposal, that kind of thing. So yeah, there was flexibility, but that's a really good point because that's definitely something we experienced.
Amazing, cool. I'll steal the mic again just to ask for another round of applause for Abby. Thank you so much again. It was very enjoyable. I hope everyone else got lots of value out of that talk. You lucky people though, we have one more talk that's coming up, as well as pizza that I've been told is currently out in the foyer. However, I am one to make people work for their food. So I have a quick question for all of you that are in the room. I would love to know how many of you here this evening are product managers, by a show of hands. Amazing. How many of you are developers or engineers? Awesome. How many of you are architects, if you didn't put your hand up for engineers? Got a couple of architects. And then and Paul at the back. And how many people have got a job that I've not mentioned that you want to shout up about? What is your role?
I am a platform product manager specialist recruiter.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing. So if people are looking for jobs, business cards, you are going to be inundated. That is incredible. What a specialization as well. Any other roles?
CEO here, Johnny.
A CEO? Amazing. Always good to have a CEO. So possibly the same sort of thing if you're looking for jobs. There's a CEO in the room. Say that again, sorry?
Delivery manager.
Delivery manager. Amazing. Close to my heart, the delivery people. Fantastic. So thank you very much for answering that one simple question. I do feel a little bit like, you're in a room full of the kind of people that you want to be in a room full of when there's loads of questions where you're like, oh, I've got an answer for that. Or I want to hear more about that. So thank you so much, Abby, for giving brilliant answers and for a fantastic talk. You're probably sick of my voice, so I'm going to let everyone go and grab drinks and pizza, but we'll be coming back in a bit. And do not worry, I've been armed with this board to let you know when it's time to come back. So see you all in a bit.
Absolutely. I even took from you and put it to our last slide. So you said I was very so I disagree. How was it?
Good. That was good. Really good.
You're relaxed. Genuinely, like, just to be fair, not pure nervous. You handled the microphone perfectly. The number of people who speak with a microphone down here, you had it perfectly placed, everyone could hear you. You spoke in a paced that everyone understands. Slides for like the right combination of words and pictures. Like, you like do not believe me only given a handful of dollars. I just don't. Honestly, I don't believe you. Like you're lying to me. Like that's it. No, genuinely, you should shop that. You should shop that around. It's a fantastic song. Really well written.
It's my old TV that I go to, my other media services.
All those questions. I never had that many like people interested. I did change my notes in the middle of that.
Small town near the German border and spend a week back. And sorry? I never know, you can hit the recruiter. I'm really good in my, I mean, conversations like that have been going on anyway, and nothing's really grabbed me yet, you know.
Hey.
Oh, this.
And to be fair, actually, doing stuff through like meetups and things might not be the worst way to sort of almost dip into it. There's so many different things going on in London, that honestly, like to even just find a specialist something, so maybe you would do abroad or you could do elsewhere. But you know, like just with others, there's so much stuff. It's very like familiar. But again, another fresh perspective. I'm like, there's a whole realm of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's really cool seeing with Meetup because Graham, who's organised today, he's like been an absolute rock star when it comes to Meetup kind of stuff. So Graham, this is Himmel. I know Himmel from government days.
Right, nice to meet you.
I won't give away the secret history.
Not really so secret.
I'll reveal it. So Himmel was based in government UK.
Oh, okay.
So had a pretty lofty responsibility, but a very wonderful team around you as well.
Amazing people, yeah.
So yeah.
Technologists, you know, engineers and architects.
Yeah.
They've done a great job there.
So they were.
How was it?
Yeah.
Such a good time.
Yeah, still absolutely. Really love working with people. Politics.
Yeah, a while ago now.